Hey peeps, I'm here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you very much for tuning in once again. We always appreciate your support. So today we're talking about philosophy. If you have just started a career at university or at college and you're thinking maybe this is not the right career for yourself, maybe you could consider philosophy. And joining me about philosophy is Ompha Malima. Ompha, thank you so much for joining. It's so great to have you on the channel.
Hi, Amma. Thank you so much for having me. It's also my honor to be interviewed as part of your channel. You've been doing amazing work, so I'm happy to have this discussion with you. I'm super excited and looking forward to it.
That's great. So, Peeps, before we roll off the intro, just want to give you a brief bio about Ompha, who is going to be talking to us about choosing philosophy as a career and the importance of philosophy in life. So what Ompha does is he is a philosopher, and that's one of the reasons why I invited him to talk about philosophy. You could only get a philosopher to talk about philosophy, right? So Ompha is an early career scholar and intellectual. He is also a writer. And on top of that, he is a producer of the Unshackling podcast. So a little bit about this podcast is that it addresses social political issues from a philosophical and analytical angle by dissecting critical points. This is really deep. Very interesting things as well, Ompha. I think you'll be happy to share the link to your podcast, right? So that I can put it in the description. I think my audience would like to check it out.
Yes, definitely. I'm definitely going to do that, and we are working on some amazing episodes. So people should just watch the space.
Yeah, I love it. Looks like you're so busy. You're doing so much. I mean, how do you get the time?
It's hard, honestly speaking. It's all about balancing it. So there's no set formula. You just do, whatever you do. It's all about showing up at the end of the day.
Yeah, great. Okay, I'm so excited for today's conversation. So we're going to roll off the intro now and stay tuned. We'll talk more about philosophy after this. Okay, so Ompha, today is all about philosophy, but let us not assume that everybody knows what philosophy is. So perhaps you can just give a short description of what philosophy is before we dig deep into the actual questions.
So I think in general terms, and all philosophers would agree, or actually anyone that studies philosophy would agree, that philosophy is basically the love of wisdom in simple terms, without going further deeply, because philosophy comes from the word wisdom, Sophia and all that. It's Greek words, you see. So it is basically the love of wisdom. But if we putting a proper working definition, we would say that philosophy is the study of general and basic questions about existence, about reality. It questions everything. That's why we have political philosophy. You have different branches. You have epistemology, which is the study of knowledge. It's basically the philosophical study of knowledge. So it questions everything. Why are we alive? It questions things about ethics. It questions things like science. There's a branch of philosophy called the philosophy of science. It questions science, the deeper meaning behind science. What is this thing called science, for instance? How do you deduce the truth? What is the truth? How do you get there? Things like that. So then philosophy is basically everywhere. The social philosophy, there's this and that philosophy, environmental philosophy, so it touches, everything. There's pedagogy, philosophy is there, linguistics, philosophy,
That's true. So in short, you are saying that philosophy is really about life. For life as it is, philosophy helps us to really understand it. Why is it life? The reasoning behind it, and all the other branches that are linked to the existence, like the different faculties that we have or the different departments that we have. You mentioned science. I believe it's everything, like education, the arts. So in other words, it is the basics of everything. And while we have that, we kind of already now have an idea of the importance of philosophy, which is my next question. But then just to target these questions directly, if you are to give us the importance of philosophy, what will you say is the importance of philosophy in society?
The importance of philosophy in society is that philosophy helps us to understand deeper problems. Every practical stuff that we deal with, whether we are dealing with, let's say, gender-based violence, we're able to deploy philosophy for that and ask ourselves, how are we going to use philosophy to deal with gender-based violence? Or maybe let's say xenophobia, for instance.
Yeah.
We can sit down and talk about Pan-Africanism, break down such things, or even teach people, be part of the activism. I also write about that in one of my recently published journal articles, about philosophy, that philosophy must not be this dry thing, that we talk about in the academy. It's something that must be talked about in our everyday society,
Yes.
dealing with things like poverty, so you can deal with poverty through philosophy by engaging with development policies, like modernization theory, underdevelopment, and all such, questions. You can do that through philosophy by questioning these other dominant stuff.
Yeah. So in so doing, is it helping us to solve the problems? Does it help us come with the solutions? What is the argument here? Does philosophy, if we are to use it in the everyday challenges that we are facing, like you indicated, GBV, xenophobia, tribalism, racism, all these social issues that we are facing, if we are to implement the ways of doing according to philosophy, are you saying it will help us come up with solutions? Is this what you say?
Yes, definitely. I mean, it does help us to actually come out with solutions, because remember, the first thing that philosophy does, it makes you think critically. It makes you, question the question, like ask beyond that question. There's a question, but you're asking behind that question, that why did this question even occur? We use different stuff like Socratic method, where if I am engaging with you, I want to answer you. I'll be asking you questions instead of telling you answers. And by me asking you questions, I'll be making you question yourself. So it makes you even question yourself, and it makes you to be, critical, to be rational, to be more reasonable. To be able to see, okay, I'm making this decision in this way. That's why you see people like judges, for instance. They are lawyers, but they're very philosophical. Look at the way judgments are written. Look at the way they also think. The way they also respond. If you read, legal judgments, they're very philosophical in some way. Some judges even, use creative writing language, in the way that they open. Some use metaphors and all that stuff. You might remember the judgment of Mogoeng against President Jacob Zuma on the Tuli Madonsela case. The way that he opened, he was talking about how she's like the Makazi, and then he also made reference to like her being something like a dragon slayer, or things like that. You see, so they are philosophical because they're able to think. And even in some places or universities that I know, if you're doing law, you can also do philosophy, or just one philosophy module, so that you're able to think, you're able to critically reason, you're able to actually link up your ideas, you're able to defend your thesis, even when you are writing, even a journal, like if you're writing something like a journalism
like articles,
piece, yes, like a journalism piece, even, not even a journal article, you can see that this person is philosophical, this person is very deep. There are people that I enjoy reading, like the likes of Eusebius Makaiser. He's a brilliant writer. You can tell when you reading him that he's a philosopher. If you read people like Thabo Mbeki, you can tell that he's a philosopher, because he thinks in a different way. And even the ideas that he has, they are actually rich ideas. He doesn't just speak about rhetoric and speak about the African Renaissance. Let me make an example of Mbeki, for instance. Mbeki used to talk about the African Renaissance as a political project, because remember, every president comes with their own political, rhetoric or like populism.
Ideologies.
But Mbeki's was very, Mbeki's was very strategic, because even now we do talk about the African Renaissance. He's one of the people that actually propounded the idea on the continent or in the country, that we should talk about the African Renaissance, this and that. And in fact, the African Renaissance is a philosophy. It guides us to think about African problems in African ways. So it's basically African solutions for African problems.
Africans.
That
Yes,
is the role
I
of
like.
philosophy in society.
Mm,
It helps us to, think beyond ideas. And when we think about the African Renaissance,
yeah,
we think about it in different terms. In terms of identity, in terms of everything. Diplomacy, our diplomatic approach, our humanitarian aid, and things like that. Even how we speak to other people. The philosophy of Ubuntu as well. It's a philosophy. It helps us to be able to dialogue. You and I right now are having a dialogue. We're not just having a debate. It's
yeah.
because of Ubuntu, because we recognize each other's humanity and that we're able to speak and all that kind of stuff.
And that all
But
comes
also
from
in
philosophy.
education, it makes you to be able to have graduates who think properly, who
Yeah.
are, very rational. They know what they're doing. They know where they're taking the state, because you can tell the difference between a person who didn't study philosophy and a person that did.
Yeah, of course. Now, while you're on that, I'm writing down here. I'm like so excited because you're raising very important points right here. I like your last part here where you mentioned it helps you to have graduates that are able to think deep. And we need that because I get so sad when people tell me that they have 3 degrees or they just recently graduated, but just to have a conversation with them, it will be as if I'm talking to someone who is maybe who just has like grade 3. I'm like, did you just graduate from university? Because it doesn't sound like that. So it would be nice if we could maybe have a philosophy module, maybe for even for all
Yes,
the
definitely.
degrees. I mean, I know we take different degrees here, but just by listening to you and also from the little bit I read about philosophy, I also agree with you that really philosophy it helps in many ways, and not all degrees have like philosophy modules, or not all degree actually challenge their graduates to think beyond a given
Yeah.
context, to think critically, to think in a context independent way, so I
Mm.
totally agree with you. And just by that, let me say this here. You also mentioned how it also helps you with the other skills like writing. So my question here to you is, are you saying that with philosophy, you may be a person that you have ideas, but then
Mm.
philosophy kind of also helps you to put those ideas into like a book. Maybe if you want to write a book, it could then also help you to just narrate those, because it's a different thing to have ideas and it's another thing to have those ideas written down or express them, right? So will philosophy help in this regard?
Yes, definitely. You have actually put it very nicely. It makes you to be coherent, but also it doesn't make you to be narrow-minded in terms of that. It will make you think like logically, without branching out. So it will make you to be, coherent, to be a coherent thinker, but also to be very, imaginative. Because philosophy is very imaginative. If you look at, all the philosophers from back then, back in the ages, they started their philosophical problems or inquiries by being imaginative. It was not a matter of scientific stuff or the book. Some of them were not even properly educated.
True.
I think it was the father of philosophy. Socrates. He was not educated as such, or one would say that he actually wrote something down. He had dialogues, but he didn't write something down where you can say this is his
Mm.
philosophy. This is a volume of his philosophy. But he's very, influential. He's dubbed as the father of Western philosophy, or even the father of philosophy. You know,
Mm.
because of such things. So
Wow.
there are just certain dynamics there. But yes, philosophy is important. It helps you to, think in a different way, in a very,
That's true.
coherent way, in a very methodical way. You can be able to be rational. You take things that are next to you. You use whatever you have. That's why they say that philosophy is the love of wisdom. Because
Yeah.
it makes you to be wise. Remember, as you made that example to the person that maybe have 3 degrees, but the way that they think, you'd think that this person is just, So,
Yes.
so then philosophy makes you to be able to be wise enough. Because remember, knowledge and wisdom are different things. Knowledge is about,
Yeah.
knowing those certain things. It's like you are carrying something. You have tools. But philosophy is basically like it's basically like the machine or the final product, or like it's
you
basically
you
the
are
manual
able.
that shows
Maybe
you how
can
to
we
use the
define?
tools.
Can we put it like this? Can we say with philosophy you
Yeah,
have those tools, which is the knowledge, but at the same
yeah,
time you're able to apply those tools in real life,
Yes.
and you're able to use them to benefit you and those around you, right? Can you put it like
Exactly. So
that?
then the application is the wisdom, or yeah, so wisdom is the application, or like even the manual to that.
Nice.
Because philosophy at the end of the day has to be practical. You
Yeah.
know, you can't just say that you're doing philosophy for the sake of it. One of the things that I specialize in is intercultural, interphilosophical dialogue. So I
Yeah.
make sure that those things I'm doing them for, certain things. I'm not just writing about political dialogue or this and that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually try to make sure that these things are happening. I'm actually trying to bring a solution. If I see that there's a diplomatic crisis between this country and this country, and I think maybe this is the approach that they can use. That's a philosophical thing. That's an idea.
Hmm.
But I'm trying to practicing it, putting it into a policy. That's what
Wow.
I believe in, that we should put our ideas into policies. Intellectuals must be able to do that. You can't just shout there in the academy, that no, this and that, this and that. You're shouting about ethics.
That's true.
They
Yeah.
should actually be, practiced. You can't be just, creating graduates, for instance, as well. Ne?
Yeah. The other thing, Ompa, that I wanted to bring to your attention was that, which I know you are aware of, that as South Africans, we are shooting this in South Africa, and
Mm.
we are faced with a lot of people that are unemployed. They just came out from university, they have their degree or degrees, and they don't have jobs. They're looking for jobs, but there are no jobs. So from what I'm getting here with philosophy is that if you have some philosophical reasoning, you will be creative in a sense that you can make ways and get an income. You can do things rather than just sitting at home and saying, I don't have a job. And then you just wait for the job to come, which you can't just wait for something to happen. You need to do something about it. So it appears that philosophy also can help to solve our unemployment crisis. I actually released a video about unemployment and how to solve it. And one of the reasons was for people to be proactive and for people to create jobs and be entrepreneurs, be their own bosses rather than just waiting for someone to hire them. So what is your reasoning about that, about philosophy helping solve the unemployment crisis in South Africa and in the world as well?
Well, first of all, I'd say that it would be a bit incorrect for you to say that if people now start to use philosophy or maybe reasoning, they would be better, equipped. The point that I'm trying to put across is that even if one studies philosophy, they can actually be unemployed. Life happens, unemployment happens, and also the reasons, and also we don't want to get into the politics of unemployment and stuff. But yes, there are certain things that you can do, with philosophy, obviously depending on your social capital, also depending on your level of education, because usually you need to have a master's or a PhD as you were to be able to do, advanced or proper research, in the sense that you can become a consultant. So you can consult, as I'm saying, maybe for companies like in HR, for instance, on like managing conflict with employees or training employees, or helping them with certain stuff, or just teaching them certain stuff, or just maybe in government departments, you're teaching them about ethics. Maybe you teach a short course about ethics, or you just train them about the Batupele principles, because that does happen in our government, where you find that someone has to train a public servants about the Batupele principles, or you can even become a lecturer. That's the safest thing to do. You can become a lecturer, whether part-time or full-time, improve yourself. If you become professor, then you have more opportunities as well. You can serve in non-profit organizations as well. You can also found your own organization if you have the resources and skills, or you can work for them. Think tanks. There are a lot of think tanks around
Yeah.
that deal with a lot of stuff. Maybe culture. You can work at an embassy. You can become a cultural attaché, or just a diplomat. With that, you can become a consultant in business management. In business ethics, because philosophers, most of them, they don't just study philosophy per se. Just philosophy, everything. There's also
It's like
business. There's also economics, mathematics, and all that.
so it's like part of a certain degree. It's just like maybe a module that is
Yes, some
within
of
the
them I
degree.
actually like that, but mine was actually a triple major. So it was a BA in politics, philosophy, and economics. You see, so there's also economics, there's also
I
politics,
see.
and then there are other people like in some. innovative, universities, I think they do things like artificial intelligence and philosophy, or they do philosophy, but they're also doing maybe Bachelor of Sciences in maybe artificial intelligence, things like, engineering, because they're able to advise on ethics, AI
Yeah,
ethics, because nowadays the danger that we have with the developing or the less developed countries is that we are creating graduates that can think. You are actually creating machines, robots.
that's so
That's what the
sad.
system
I
is doing.
know.
You are creating someone who studied engineering, they know about robotics and all, but they don't know anything about ethics. They don't know about the cultural implications of that. That
There is
if I'm
no
creating this
holistic
robot, what is going to
development.
happen? How do we
Yeah,
preserve our identity? Because remember, technology must work for you. You must not work for technology, because
that's true.
we are coming to, to an age of what some scholar calls, techno-chauvinism, whereby our lives are under technology. We bow to
Hmm.
technology. I actually discussed that like in a previous, episode of the podcast, but the podcast hasn't been released yet. But we were discussing the 4AR as well on the continent. And then we talked about these things as well, the need for that. I also argue as well, as you say in conclusion, that philosophy should be, put everywhere, should be mandated. I think that, or if I had the power, I would think that, and it's not because I studied philosophy or anything like that. It's just basically because I think that every person in high school should study Introduction to African Philosophy. That should be their history, and in varsity as well. Every module, every course should have a philosophical module, even if
Yeah,
it's just two modules for philosophy or just critical reasoning. There was a
just to
module
have
that I
the
did called
basics. Just to
critical,
have the basics.
reasoning. Yeah, so there was a module that I did called Introduction to Critical Reasoning. So then there was a book that we did, and that we used called Critical Reasoning and the Art of Argumentation. It was written by M.E.S. Vandenberg. So that was an amazing module for me. It also improved my thinking skills, because I can see if there's a fallacy or not. Even when I'm writing a journalistic piece, if you check my pieces, you can tell that I'm thinking in a different way. I'm having this angle. I'm not just thinking about something. If I'm talking
Yeah,
about xenophobia, I'm talking about it, but I'm not just talking about it.
yeah.
You know,
Okay,
yeah.
so yeah, that's true. I heard earlier on you mentioned about the different career options that are available after studying philosophy, which I think those are really great. It really gives people different
Mm,
choices to think about if they are to consider
yeah.
to become a philosopher. At least it gives them an indication of what career options are they going to do, what are they going to work as.
Mm,
I think you also touched a little bit about how you can also be your own boss, or otherwise, you can
yeah.
also be a consultant. So you really broke that down for us nicely. But now let's talk about how can one become a philosopher. If you want to become a philosopher and you're watching this video and you're thinking, wow, maybe I should give this a chance. I mean, you indicated that it can be part of a degree as well. So maybe then you can explain the starting point. How do you start? What do you need after matric? To become a philosopher, like, and what qualifications one has to consider. I think you mentioned them a little bit earlier on, but maybe we could just focus a little bit more on that.
So I actually think this is simple, eh? And my view is quite controversial, but not necessarily very controversial. It's controversial maybe to those Western scholars or to rather conservatives, because they think that for one to be called something, they need to be certified by the Western Academy, you know. And that is not the case, honestly speaking. You can be a philosopher as you are, having studied maybe education or something or policy, but you can be a philosopher, even though you didn't study philosophy. I have a cousin who I'm very proud of. I actually see him as a philosopher. I actually have two of them. I see both of them as philosophers. The other one studied genetics, the other one studied computer science. But the quality of conversations that I can have with them, even the depth of thinking, their depth and level of thinking is unmatched. It's something else. They didn't study philosophy. The other one studied logic, maths. That's also philosophy, but he didn't study, this philosophy that I studied, the theory and all that, having to think
Yeah.
about more stuff about philosophy. But still, so the point is that being a philosopher, it doesn't really need you to be educated, but to be on the safe side, being a philosopher, you at least, if you need to be a quality philosopher, at least be an academic, at least study further, have at least a master's, or even go further to PhD, because that's when you are able to get an opportunity to do more research. You're able to have institutional access. Even your network, your social capital increases. You're able to think differently. You go to conferences. Going to conferences helps because you are with your peers. You're publishing in journals, because that's peer reviewed. I mean, your peers are saying that, you're rated by the likes of the National Research Foundation. Maybe you are a Y3 researcher, you're a researcher. That really helps for that. But that's not the only requirement. I also don't have an honors degree or master's degree, but I am a philosopher because I've ended right. I've published, I've written, I've debated, I've engaged about philosophy in so many ways. Even my teachers can acknowledge that. So philosophy is quite loose, but it's also ordered. It's not so much that it's disorganized that everyone can just jump into the bandwagon and then tomorrow you just wake up and be like, oh, today I'm feeling like I'm a philosopher. It's not really like that. You just need to be grounded. There's a guy that I know as well from Facebook. This guy is a brilliant philosopher. He's better than me. I must actually acknowledge, way better than me. He knows every single sub branch of philosophy, if I'm not mistaken. He knows every branch. I do know most of the branches because some are grouped into 5 general ones, and then some is like maybe 10 loosely, and then there are sub branches. That one knows the deep stuff. He's better than me. That one I'm sure of it. But he didn't study philosophy. I think he studied Bachelor of Education and he left. He doesn't even have a degree as yet, or maybe an honors degree. Didn't study philosophy, but he's a brilliant philosopher. He can apply philosophy everywhere, in every topic. You see,
and that's helpful, and it helps, and that helps, right? Because the whole point of this conversation is what is it that philosophy is doing that the world needs, and I think you've touched on that. So as a philosopher, you are also trying to solve world problems. So whatever you're reasoning about, whatever you're writing about, the whole reason is to solve the challenges that we are facing as a country, as a continent, and as the world. And I've read your pieces. Definitely, I am with you. You are doing amazing work with your pieces. And I would really like to just put the links to your writings in the description as well. So please share them with me so that I can put them in the description for those who be interested to read about what you're saying, and for people to actually believe that what you're saying is true. Your reasoning is on another level. I love it. And that's why I actually invited you here. So this brings us to the end of this conversation. I wish I could talk to you throughout, day out and day in. But you've been amazing, Ompha. I really appreciate your time and you sharing your expertise in this topic. And I hope it gives light to other people who are considering philosophy and those who just want to know what philosophy is all about and its importance. I think you've done a great job. And I think I should say to the audience that if they enjoyed this conversation, they should just share this with everybody and give it a big thumbs up, and also just subscribe to Amma and Peeps. And thank you, Ompha. You were amazing.
Thank you so much. For having me on the channel as well. This was an amazing conversation and your questions were amazing as well. I enjoyed the discussion. This was, this was worthwhile. This was worth it, and it got me fired up. It just gave me too much energy. I was excited about it, and I'm happy about it. It's good to have conversations like this because people need to learn differently. Because people have misconceptions about philosophy and all that.
I'm happy, and it was great. I hope everybody enjoyed it as well. So this is it from us. Take care and goodbye.